And what is the U.S. involvement in Yemen?
Yeah, so this is really the very worst one. In 2009, Obama comes in and he orders the CIA, I want you guys to hunt and kill al-Qaeda guys. Forget all this going after Saddam Hussein and the Baathists. We're actually hunting and killing bin Ladenites now, okay? So go to Pakistan, go to Yemen, kill these guys off. He wanted to end the war on terrorism. He wanted to fight it and win it and finish it. Yeah, right. So what happens is the CIA does launch a air campaign and special operations forces launch a war against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. These were the guys who had helped coordinate the September 11th attack. They had bombed the USS Cole in the year 2000. And importantly, the real drone war in Yemen started in early end of October, beginning of November 2009. Well, then it was on Christmas Day 2009. The end of December was when the underpants bomber tried to blow up the plane over Detroit. And he'd been sent there by AQAP to do it. He was a Nigerian, but he'd been recruited in Yemen and sent by these Yemeni al-Qaeda guys to do the attack. And then according to all the official mythology, that's when America's intervention in Yemen ramped up, was in response to the underpants bomb. When no, the underpants bomb was retaliation for the American drone war. Again, cart before horse, but that's how they like to lie, by omission and by trying to confuse your chronology, you know? But if you go read antiwar.com for, news.antiwar.com, Jason Ditz's writings for the fall of 2009, you see that the drone bombing had already begun. So now this is totally counterproductive. The more they bombed al-Qaeda, the more that they grew them. And Jeremy Scahill, again, he wrote about this in his book, Dirty Wars, and in two great articles for The Nation. One of them is called something Yemen War Backfires, War in Yemen Backfires, something like that. And it's about how every time that they dropped the bomb on the AQAP guys, they ended up killing innocent people and driving more people into the AQAP group. And in one important case, there was a town leader, village elder type guy who had gone to a meeting with the al-Qaeda guys to tell them they better stay the hell away from his village if they know what's good for them. And the Americans bombed that meeting and killed the old man who was telling them that they better stay away if they know what's good for them, killed him too. And along with 20-something women and children were killed in that one. And so it's just like pouring water on a garden, right? Pouring blood on al-Qaeda. You just grow them and grow them and grow them. Okay? So that's in the south of the country against the al-Qaeda guys. Now, approximately in the middle of the country is the capital city of Sana'a. And at that time, the dictator there was a guy named Abdullah Saleh. And Saleh had been working for the Americans since at least Bill Clinton, I think the George H.W. Bush years, like 30 years, loyal patron of America, client state. And so Obama had to pay him in money and guns for permission to wage the drone war. In fact, he would even take responsibility for drone strikes that everybody knew were American drone strikes. Chelsea Manning later proved in the WikiLeaks that they had a deal that he would take responsibility for the American deaths. But then he took all the money and guns and picked a fight with the Houthis, who are a group of Zaidi Shia rebels from the north of Yemen, up in the Sada province. And the problem with that was every time he attacked them, they beat him. And every time he attacked them, they grew stronger, just like al-Qaeda grew stronger every time we attacked them in the south. The Houthi group grew stronger and stronger every time Saleh attacked them. Then the Arab Spring revolutions and Days of Rage and all that come in 2011. And there's a massive protest movement, and the Houthis join it. The Houthis, the Southern Socialists, I don't know about the al-Qaeda guys, but the Muslim Brotherhood and everybody else were saying, we got to get rid of Saleh now. We want democracy and regular elections and whatever. Well, somebody set off a bomb and almost killed Saleh, or at least they wounded him pretty severely. So he was at home convalescing. And at that point, Hillary Clinton made a deal with the Saudis that let's go in there and we'll push him out and we'll install his vice president, Hadi, in power. And they held an election. And again, check my work. Just put in Hadi ballot 2012, and you'll see there's one man on the ballot. one name on the ballot, just like in the Soviet Union. Yeah, you can vote, but there's only one party to vote for. Same kind of thing here. And Hillary Clinton called this the invention of Yemeni democracy, that she and Saudi had installed a dictator. Okay, well, so Hadi made the same mistake that Saleh made in trying to attack the Houthis in the north. But he never had anything like the power and influence lined up that Saleh had had. And in fact, Keith, when Saleh lost his job, was fired by the Americans, he didn't just run off. He took his army with him and took, like 2/3 of the army followed Saleh when he left. And then here's the rub. He went and joined forces with the Houthis because it turns out, that Saleh was not a member of the Houthi political movement, but he was a Zaydi Shia from the north, just like them. And so he made an alliance with them, and they ended up marching on the capital city and seizing it by the end of 2014 and forced Hadi out of power. Now, if you check carefully, if you look at in fact, just read my last couple articles for antiwar.com. There's some references to this in there. Wherever I mention Yemen, I always bring this up. That there's a Wall Street Journal article, and there's an article in Al Monitor by Barbara Slavin. And they both report the same thing. Michael Vickers, who was the Deputy Secretary of Defense he was a general, but maybe he's Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, something like that. I forget his exact role. So that's a civilian position, I think. But maybe he was maybe he was a civilian by then. I'm pretty sure he was Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, but had been a 2-star. Anyway, so Michael Vickers explains to the Atlantic Council, and Barbara Slavin reports this, and then the Wall Street Journal had it from other sources, that the U.S. is working with the Houthis. We don't mind if the Houthis take over the capital city. What do we care about that? You know who the Houthis hate? Al-Qaeda. And so we're passing intelligence to the Houthis for them to use to target and kill Al-Qaeda guys, which was working. And they were successful at that. But then just 2 months later, Barack Obama, in March of 2015, stabbed the Houthis in the back and took Al-Qaeda's side against them. When Saudi Arabia wanted to launch this war, it was Crown Prince Bonesaw Mohammed bin Salman, who was at that time, had just been named Deputy Crown Prince and Defense Minister, just 29 years old. And Patrick Coburn wrote an article back at the time about how this is all public choice theory politics inside the Saudi royal family. This hardly has anything to do with the Houthis or Yemen. This is about Mohammed bin Salman moving up in the chain of command and solidifying his power inside the royal establishment there in Saudi Arabia, which apparently did help him because he arrested his cousin, bin Nayef, and made himself crown prince. He's now the de facto king. Marginalized all his cousins, arrested all his uncles and anybody who could stand in his way, and moved up and launched this war. And the Obama government helped them do it. And the Obama government, they told the New York Times that the reason that they did it was because they had to placate the Saudis. And they knew, as they put it, that the war against the Houthis would be long, bloody, and indeterminate. In other words, they knew that they didn't even know what victory was supposed to look like. And they launched it anyway. And why? To placate the Saudis. Why'd they have to placate the Saudis? Because Obama was in the middle of doing a deal with the Iranians for the nuclear deal. Now, you might think that nuclear deal, which very much did lock down the Iranian nuclear program and prevent them from even being theoretically within a year of being able to make a single nuclear bomb, you might think that was a big favor to the Saudis. That, boy, see how well we protect your interests, locking down Iran's nuclear program? But no, turns out that the Iranian bomb was always a hoax anyway. The Saudis weren't afraid of that. That was always a pretext. What they were afraid of was that Obama might tilt back toward Iran and make America friends with Iran again, and that Saudi Arabia would lose their place of importance in the American-dominated order in the Middle East. And so in order to placate them, he went along with escalating their policy against Iran's friend Bashar al-Assad in Damascus and helped them to launch this war against the Yemenis, against the Houthis. And this meant, and look, the Saudis don't have a land force of any real note except for the U.S. Army. But all of their planes and all of their weapons and everything that they have comes from us. And so it was American F-15s flying, dropping American bombs made by Lockheed and Raytheon, is American ships in the U.S. Navy sailing offshore to enforce the blockade and help the Saudis enforce the blockade there. It is Boeing planes doing the refueling so that the Saudi F-15s can loiter and look around for new targets to hit. It was American contractors, spies and military men who are helping them pick all their targets, collecting all their intelligence for them. And I don't know exactly what you call this, Keith, but I have 5 different sources who each have one source. 4 journalists and 1 former ambassador, all who have one source each, saying that there were American white boys sitting in the back seats of those F-15s, holding the princelings' hands all the way to their targets, helping them fly in order to drop those bombs, at least in the early days of the war. And so even though just like with Obama in Libya, you can call it leading from behind, it's absolutely an American war. It absolutely could not be taking place without American support. And Obama and Trump both have, to a slight degree, kept up the war against AQAP as well, but not really. I mean, there's a mission here and a mission there, but in fact, AQAP has joined up the United Arab Emirates mercenary army there. The UAE is in league with the Americans and the Saudis, and their mercenary army on the ground includes all the Al-Qaeda guys have joined them. And, you know, there's a reporter that I talk to from time to time from Sana'a named Nasser Arabi, and former New York Times reporter before he started reporting on this aspect of the war that they don't want to hear. But I asked him, hey, man, you know, they say they're still fighting AQAP at the same time they're fighting AQAP's enemies, the Houthis. Is there any truth to that? And he just laughs and scoffs. Oh, really? The CIA is drone bombing the UAE's army on the ground? Yeah, I don't think so. And, you know, the Associated Press has done actually quite a bit of really good work on American support and our allies' support for AQAP there in this war, and including the UAE's torture of innocent Yemeni captives and so forth. And CNN last year did a special report, and I know CNN, but this was credible, did a report about Al-Qaeda guys driving around in American MRAPs. And this is not like Western Iraq where ISIS is stealing from the armories that the Americans left behind. This is equipment that the Americans gave to the UAE, and the UAE is filling them up with their mercs, which include a bunch of Al-Qaeda guys. And so this war is treason. It is being fought on behalf of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the guys that helped coordinate the September 11th attack, the guys that bombed the Cole, the guys that did the underpants bombing on Christmas 2009, the guys that did the Charlie Hebdo attack in France, that did the package bomb plot that failed, luckily. It was meant to blow up a plane over the U.S. This war is treason. And just like Somalia across the Red Sea there, it amounts to a genocide, a campaign of starvation and mass death against the civilian population of the country. And as Martha Mundy, above all, has documented, but many others as well, the U.S. Saudi UAE alliance here, Al-Qaeda alliance, they have targeted the farms. They target the grain silos. They target the flocks of sheep in the field. They target the irrigation systems. They target the hospitals, the waterworks, the electricity, the sewage. They bomb dozens of hospitals. They're doing everything they can to destroy the very basic, parts of the Yemeni economy for the sustainment of civilian life. They're deliberately targeting and killing the civilian population in order to try to pressure them to overthrow their government, which never works. It's never worked. We've had the same policy in Cuba for 70 years. It hasn't worked. We had the policy in North Korea for 70 years. It's never worked. We had this policy in Iraq for 12 years, between H.W. Bush, 10 years, between H.W. Bush and Bush Jr., 12 because it was started halfway through Bush Sr., then all the way through Bill Clinton, and then a couple of years into Bush Jr. They had this policy against Iraq, never led to the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, but it did lead to the September 11th attack against the United States. Our policy of keeping troops in Saudi Arabia, airmen in Saudi Arabia, in order to bomb and blockade Iraq, in order to force them out, is the main thing that provoked them to turn on the U.S. and attack them, and attack us back in 2001.
And on page
and
30,
wait, let me just say real quick that we know for a fact that at least 250,000 civilians have died in this thing. 85,000 children under 5 years old. 85,000. And that was last year's numbers. They're certainly much higher now. And we're also on the verge of the rainy season and therefore a third cholera outbreak as well. The last 2 cholera outbreaks out there have been the most severe in recorded modern human history, with hundreds of thousands of cases and thousands of deaths.
Sure. And on page 37, you mention Madeleine Albright on 60 Minutes discussing those sanctions, saying that she believed that the price was worth it. Later on page, I think it's 56, later you actually quote bin Laden's letter to the Americans, which he actually addresses sanctions against Iraq. So it's not like, well, I kind of have a feeling, like they're the ones who say, I have a feeling they hate us for our freedom. We have actually documented evidence to back up any statements that we make. Of course, if you go to clintonfoundation.org under charitable donations between $10 and $25 million, you could find the Saudi royal family there. Also, November 20th, 2018, statement from President Donald J. Trump on standing with Saudi Arabia after the Khashoggi incident. Of the $450 billion, $110 billion will be spent on the purchase of military equipment from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and many other great U.S. defense contractors. That is on whitehouse.gov. So yeah, the Saudis are absolutely infiltrating the U.S. government. That's why Russia is the great distraction. So
yeah. Think about what he's saying there, that the USA, that we're simply mercenaries, and that if you pay us money, we'll murder whoever you want. The Houthis never attacked us, never threatened us. Again, they were working with CENTCOM to kill Al-Qaeda guys up until the moment that Obama stabbed them in the back. And then think about what he's saying there. First of all, the $450 billion that the Saudis invest in the United States, what a crock. There's no $450 billion coming from Saudi into the United States. Even the $100 billion that he says is going to these few defense contractors is way overblown. That's what they promised to spend over the next 10 or 15 years, this kind of thing. And so, but even take it at face value. Well, this is a $20 trillion economy. So assuming you had no morals whatsoever and you're simply a mercenary, that still is absolute chicken feed. That has nothing to do with benefiting the American people in any sense whatsoever. You know, benefiting employees of Lockheed, fine. But that's such a small percentage of the GDP of this country. There's no way that you could spin that as beneficial to America as a whole at all. And then, especially as Thomas Jefferson said, I tremble when I reflect that God is just and that his vengeance cannot sleep forever. And so whether you believe in karma or Jesus or whatever is your thing here, this is the history of the world being written. America killing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. In the words of our president, for the money, we're doing this.
Yeah, it's incredible. Smedley Butler warned about it in like the 1920s. Eisenhower was a World War II general and a president. He warned about it. And then you have Trump openly saying it.